Hi guys, in this video we'll learn how to model and render this house over here. So first things first, head over to this link over here and download the architecture diagrams. I downloaded the lower floor and the upper floor reference. Then in Blender 2.8, go ahead and delete the default cube and go ahead and add an empty. So go Shift A, empty, then choose image. Then in the empty settings, change the image to the lower floor reference, duplicate that one, and then change that image to the upper floor reference. Then change the transparency of the upper floor and transpose it over the lower floor and make sure that it fits in line. Once you're done, go ahead and hide the upper floor reference. Note that I'm using the metric system in Blender for this because my reference image is also using the metric system. I used a ruler tool over here to measure out 11.29 meters, as that was about the length in the reference image as well. So then I lined it up to the reference. This is to keep my house model true to scale in the Blender world. I've then started modeling the lower floor. So for this one, I started with a plane and then added loop cuts to add in those extra areas of the house. So the back of the house and the front of the house. Extruded and scaled. So now that the lower floor is done, I went ahead and changed the reference to the upper floor, and then I duplicated the lower floor mesh and then modified the upper floor mesh to match the reference. I then moved the upper floor to a height of 3 meters because that is about the average height of a floor in a house. So I just went ahead on the right toolbar, changed the Z to 3. I also duplicated a plane for the ceiling and then moved that 6 meters on the Z axis. So now all my floors were done. So now it was time to model the walls. For the walls, I used the lower floor mesh and pretty much just duplicated it and removed all the inner faces so that I'm left with the outer frame of it. And then I lined up the outer frame to match the reference. Once that was done, I then extruded it up on the Z axis to go up in line with the upper floor. So I moved that on the Z axis 3 meters, and then I extruded once more, then moved it on the Z axis 6 meters to cover the entire floor. think at this point I realized I made a mistake with the balcony topology, so I went back and fixed that part. And then I selected everything again and then extruded up. But then I realized that the balcony part from the front and the back don't go all the way up to the ceiling, so I had to separate out the meshes and move just those parts down on the Z-axis. And then I went ahead and filled up everything else. Finally, I went ahead and added a solidify modifier just to add some thickness to our walls. Make sure the even thickness checkbox is ticked, as that will ensure you don't get any weird looking artifacts. Here I also had to separate some parts to fix up some weird deformations and artifacts in the solidify modifier, so I had to literally separate it out by hitting V in edit mode. This most commonly occurred when there was one vertex but 3 different edges. So once that was done, I went ahead and went to the ceiling mesh. I added a loop cut right in the middle, and then I extruded it up a little bit, and then I moved the middle edge higher to create the roof. At this point, the overall model of the house was done. So now it was actually time to start adding the windows and doors. For this one, I used the Archi Mesh add-on that comes inbuilt in Blender 2.79. At the time of recording, it was not available in Blender 2.8, so I had to do this all in Blender 2.79. Archi Mesh allows you to create some really cool looking windows and doors, and you can even customize it to make it look the way that you want it to look. You can change the number of panels, the number of rows, the shape of your windows, the type of handles that you want to use for your windows, loads of things. So for the door, you can also make some customizations to how you want your door to look like. So I think I ended up choosing a quite simple door. The Archi Mesh add-on also allows you to create roofs. So I chose the type of roof that I wanted. Mine was mostly a squarish style roof. I think that's what I ended up going with. So then I went ahead and saved that into a group in Blender 2.79. So box select all the meshes and hit Ctrl G to save it into a group. And then in Blender 2.8, you go to File, Append, and then you append the collection. So now it was simply a matter of positioning the windows according to the reference. Once I was happy with the positioning of the windows, I then selected the wall mesh and then added a Boolean modifier. And then for the object, I chose the control hole object, which is that transparent box in the window. And then changed the type to, I think, difference, the geometry to difference. What that would do is that will essentially cut a hole in place of your window. So if you added like a transparent texture to your window, you can actually see through your window. There'll literally be a hole in that wall. A very quick and easy way to add holes to your mesh. So I pretty much just went around, added windows, and kept using the Boolean modifier to cut holes where the windows were placed. Rinse and repeat. I was pretty much doing the same thing all throughout the house. With the windows and doors now done, it was time to start adding the roof. I positioned the roof over where I wanted it on the ceiling, and then simply use the array modifier that came with the Archimesh add-on to distribute it along the length of the roof and across the width of the roof as well. And then rotate it to fit the ceiling. I then went ahead and duplicated it by hitting Shift D, and then moved it to the other side to complete the roof. Finally, I used the roof mesh again to remove the extra rows, and then just use that one row, and then just distribute it along the length of the ceiling to create that top bit for the roof. Sorry, I don't really know what's the technical term for that bit on top, but it just makes the roof look more complete. So here on in, I was making some tweaks, and I joined all the meshes into one mesh, mostly to get rid of that little artifact that you see where two mesh interact at the same spot. I also added that middle part that, as you can see from the reference image that I copied, just to make the scene look more interesting. If you're following along, I guess you don't really need to follow what I'm doing here. I then went ahead and deleted all the tiles that's surrounding that vicinity, and then added a little covering for the top of that part. And I gave it the same roof material as well. Played around with the height a bit more, and by adjusting the height I realized I probably deleted a little bit too many tiles, so I brought some back just by duplicating them. Then went ahead and added loop cuts around the ceiling mesh to remove that part that's intersecting with the middle part. So finally I went ahead and modeled a very simple balcony. It's really just a bunch of cubes. Even the balcony glass itself was a cube, a thinner cube. Finally, I threw in some extra models, which is mostly cubes, just for the ground. To finish off the model and make it look a bit more interesting, I went ahead and added drain pipes. This helps to add a little bit more detail to the house and make it look more realistic. Modeling is nothing more than simply just a cylinder that's extruded a couple of times and scaled. So I went ahead and added to the back of the house as well. I added a loop cut at the bottom just to smooth things out. I added a bunch of light bulbs, which are simply just spheres. Then added a long cube just to add that supporting beam for the balcony. Finally, I went ahead and added a bevel modifier to the house just to smooth things out a little bit. Remember, everything in the real world isn't 100% sharp. Everything has a little bit of a bevel to it. Even a knife, believe it or not. So this bevel modifier can help us to reach a little bit more realism than without it. That's it. That's how I modeled this house in Blender. In the next video, we'll look at how to texture and render this house to make it look really photorealistic. Thanks for watching.